And thank you for joining us. And Mark, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that, the energy industry faces an array of challenges right now. We're trying to deal with the need for massive transmission investment. We're trying to integrate renewables into the generation mix. We're attempting to build new clean coal and nuclear facilities. At the same time, new technologies and businesses are rapidly emerging and getting established. And I just wonder, from your standpoint, what do you see as the major challenges, threats, and opportunities facing the power industry from these ever-changing developments?
Right. Well, as Edison once said, from great difficult times come great opportunities. So it is an interesting time. I think in terms of opportunities, let's start there. It is still and will be a very heavily regulated industry. We also happen to be a very fragmented industry. If you look at the utility space, the top 10 utilities in the world, none of them are in the United States. We have 300 investor-owned utilities in this country, each of them driven by both federal and state policy, which in many cases it can be conflicting and can send disparate signals. So we've got industry participants that are all in different places. I think from a core opportunity standpoint, each of them has tremendous infrastructure assets that, despite the fact that we're in difficult economic times, they can, without having to throw them out and starting over, we can make tremendous strides, particularly on the technology front. If you look at the smart grid initiatives, none of them have resulted in a unifying path for smart grid, but each of them in their own respective utilities have developed into tremendous strides forward. As another example, opportunities would include things like GIS, GPS. We have the opportunity to integrate those technologies with existing CIS, with existing outage management, with existing maps and records, with existing engineering systems to provide real-time data, decision-making data right down to an individual contributor level in the field in a way that's never been done before. And that's not a situation where we need to throw everything out and start over. There are numerous examples like that in the industry where we can move forward with a very constrained capital environment and make significant positive developments and contributions. Things that a customer will notice, things that will make a difference to the economics of the business. So it is a positive time despite the economic constraints that we face. The challenges, though, include the fact that we are in a downturn, so we need to be sensitive to the fact that you can't go in and just routinely get a rate increase. Very few utilities can do that right now, or certainly they can't get what they're asking for. So they need to figure out how to do more with less, how to do more with very little in some cases. But they need to look within and see the assets that they have and make the best use of them. On the threat front, I think it would include things like data privacy. We need to understand how to manage data well in uncertain times. We need to look at these cyber threats and take them very seriously. As I mentioned to another audience this morning, most of the cyber threats that we see in the industry are coming from areas of the world that are not subject to law enforcement. Cyber threats are coming from the West Bank, they're coming from central China, they're coming from the liberated states that used to be part of the former Soviet Union. We don't have law enforcement that can reach into those and apply any kind of calming to the waters. So in that standpoint, many utilities are on their own to defend and protect their assets. They need to step up and do that aggressively. So there are threats. There are, though, opportunities that can be taken advantage of, and we can overcome those threats. So it is still a positive time despite the economic circumstances that we're in.
Mm-hmm. And what can Congress, the Obama administration, and federal regulators do to help the industry tackle these enormous tasks ahead of us?
Right. I think it would be too much to ask them to come out at this point with any kind of national energy policy. I mean, that's the gift that's been asked for every Christmas since I was a kid, right? And it hasn't happened. But I do think they can speak with a more consistent voice. And that consistency will then trickle down to some more, I would say, flexible environmental policies, flexible regulatory policies at a FERC level. It'll certainly help create consistency between the states. If we, for instance, talk about carbon capture in a more consistent way between the Congress and the administration. If we can talk about capital recovery in a more consistent way. What's going to be paid for from a transmission standpoint? What's the rate of return that can be expected? What fees, what costs, what capital is going to be put at risk and by who? What's going to be the federal point of view on right-of-ways and paying for private lands to allow for transmission expansion? What's going to be the federal point of view on If you look at something like natural gas and the fracking that's taking place in certain geographical areas in the country that's now moving into residential areas, what's going to be the federal point of view on safety around that? Those kinds of points of view, the federal government needs to be more consistent. They need to be more unified between the various legislative bodies that are involved with those points of view. And that will trickle down to the states to allow them to have a more, I think, coherent and rational set of policies that then can help facilitate a move forward with respect to the various industry participants that are out there. If that can happen on a political front, it will let the wheels of commerce turn forward.
And as part of its economic stimulus efforts, the federal government's been spending billions of dollars on smart grid endeavors and R&D and energy efficiency. In your opinion, have those investments been making a difference?
I think they're decidedly mixed. If you look at, for instance, the subsidies that are out there for solar power, for instance, solar power is still struggling in this country, even with the subsidies that are out there. And if you remove those subsidies, even with the run-up in petroleum that's taken place in the last month, you remove those subsidies in solar would almost be at a standstill. So solar's still not there yet. I think they're a generation or two away from a really competitive product that will work both on a commercial and on a residential basis. Wind, however, has been, I think, a positive development. I think wind is starting to coalesce around some major players. They're getting scale now. The price point for wind has come way down. If you look at the latest generation of technology that's being put out there, you go into West Texas and you can see the development there is substantial in its form. There are thousands of wind units now out there. But you can also look at those same wind units and you can see the challenge of the industry, because at any given moment some of those wind units are moving ferociously fast and the ones right next to them are not moving at all. What that points out is that there's still a lot we don't understand about how to capture wind effectively. But I do think that the move forward on wind has been positive, and I think the returns there are going to start to improve as we see events around petroleum allow for an escalated price on petroleum. You're going to see more attraction to wind. But I also think that if you look at the base power resources that we have in this country, coal and natural gas, they're going to be around and they're going to be our base power from here into the next several decades. I don't see that as being displaced at all by the alternative energy that's been proposed and that's under development. There's just not enough of it being proposed and developed right now to allow it to be displaced. That's not to say, though, that the coal production and gas production can't be done better, more safely, more effectively. There are technologies out there that are allowing for clean coal to occur now in ways that we never would have imagined. So those kinds of developments are improving what has been, the coal question. And the coal question has always led the industry to, want to reach for alternative sources. But I think coal now is really stepping up. And I think as a base power source, it's going to be more attractive as we go forward. On the smart grid front, I think the answer to your question is also very mixed. There have been a lot of false starts. I think the hype around smart grid now is gone past. The bloom is clearly off the rose on smart grid now. And what you're seeing development projects that are yielding some really good returns for several different utilities. But it's under a variety of different definitions for smart grid. It's not a singular path forward. It's not an initiative where the outcome is predefined for every utility to be the same. So some folks are focusing on, for instance, using smart grid data to allow for better outage management. Some are focusing on allowing for remote on-offs for various customer installations. Some are focusing on looking at different rate designs and are doing some things that are pretty far-reaching around commercial industrial accounts. But sitting here today, I think the jury's still out on what the long-term direction is going to be for smart grid success. There's not a jurisdiction in this country right now that allows for residential time-of-use metering and allowing that kind of pricing to occur. So while the meters are out there, the use of the data is still, to be decided. So the initial start was mixed. I think the direction, though, is still positive. I think the capital around smart grid is much more cautious now. The business cases are more demanding. And from here forward, I think it's going to be up to some very smart, very effective managers to deliver incremental value and not try to swing for the fences on every visionary idea around smart grid. We need to move in one step at a time and do well that way rather than try to just take one big leap forward.
All right. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.